Welcome back to this self-help program for social anxiety. In the previous module, we presented a cognitive model of social anxiety that provides the basis for exposure therapy, which is the topic in this video. We've mentioned earlier that our anxiety reaction is our brain's way of telling us that something is dangerous. When anxiety turns on, we become aware and alert. In the case of an anxiety disorder, this mechanism, which is usually a healthy and necessary process, has become too sensitive, triggering too often from too little. Today, we know a lot about the process that underlies the development of social anxiety and how to get rid of it. And this brings us to exposure therapy. But before we explain what exposure therapy is, we need to review how social anxiety develops. We'll start with the model we introduced in the previous video, where we'll focus more closely at two processes. The first is how our catastrophe thoughts triggers our anxiety reaction. In the previous module, we used the example that Peter thought he wouldn't be able to speak because of his anxiety. This is a very scary thought indeed. And if someone actually experienced Peter's catastrophe thoughts in real life, actually not being able to speak due to anxiety, then they would certainly agree that it's awful. The same can be said about Peter's other catastrophe thoughts, like that other people will think he's weak, strange or pathetic if he seems anxious. We can all agree that we don't want others thinking that we're weak, strange or pathetic. From Peter's perspective, it's no wonder that he's trying everything he can to hide his anxiety. Process number 2 is how we respond when we are afraid of something, aka anxious. Anxiety is an inherently unpleasant experience that we want to avoid or escape. That is precisely the function of anxiety, to motivate us to do what it takes in order to keep us safe and make the anxiety go away. If you're afraid of heights, then it's getting away from the edge. If you're afraid of snakes, then it's keeping them away from you. And with social anxiety, it is to avoid embarrassing yourself, making a scene, being the center of attention, etc. So, to summarize, we have a natural instinct to avoid anxiety. The problem with avoidance and safety behaviors is that they effectively stop you from reality checking your catastrophic thoughts. If Peter dropped the whole presentation because of his fear that he wouldn't be able to talk, he loses the chance to disprove that catastrophic thought. On the other hand, if Peter manages to stick with it, even if it's very uncomfortable, he might experience that he can talk even though he has a lot of anxiety, and that people don't judge him as harshly as he fears. That's what we call a reality check. This is great for Peter because the experience invalidates his catastrophic thinking and he might experience less anxiety the next time he has a presentation. This is what exposure therapy is all about, doing the opposite of what is natural, that is, exposing yourself to anxiety to get rid of it. Actively seeking out situations that trigger anxiety, which again incites your catastrophic thinking, gives you the chance to reality check your catastrophic thoughts. This is also known as a behavioral experiment. It's important that you don't use safety behaviors while engaging in exposure, as these will make the reality checking less effective. They might even completely cancel out the effect of the exposure. This is because your safety behaviors hinder you in evaluating the catastrophic thoughts. You're left with the thought, what would have happened if I didn't use my safety behaviors? What if I hadn't concentrated on keeping the anxiety under control? Another reason to reduce or preferably cut safety behaviors completely is that it makes the social task, for example, to talk to someone, give a presentation, order something at the restaurant, more difficult. This is because safety behaviors leads to self-focus, which in turn reinforce anxiety symptoms, like we mentioned in the previous module. The ultimate goal of exposure therapy is to give you freedom to live the life you want. In order to do that, you'll have to develop tolerance for social risks. And what do we mean by that? Take a look at these examples. Forgetting the name of an acquaintance, making a bad presentation while stuttering and mispronouncing a word, losing a bunch of coins on the floor at the mall, misunderstanding someone in a conversation, be perceived as strange or weird, blushing in a meeting, hand trembling due to nervousness. Then ask yourself, can you ensure that these things won't happen to you? What do you have to do in order to guarantee you won't experience social blunders like the ones we mentioned? Well, the answer is that you should isolate yourself completely. Be extremely vigilant in social situations. Use all your safety behaviors and so on. Being yourself would be out of the question. You need to be on the lookout, watch out, tread carefully. This is just the sort of stuff that maintains social anxiety. That's why the development of a tolerance for social risk is an important goal in this self-help treatment. With such a tolerance, you could tell yourself, I'd like to talk with that guy, say a few things in this meeting, ask a question. I might misunderstand something or make a bad impression, and that would be unfortunate, but I'll do it anyway, because that's what I want to do. Another important perspective is to look at your anxiety reaction. You can feel the effects of anxiety on both your body and mind. It's the sympathetic nervous system that governs this process, and the reaction you're feeling is called the fight or flight response. The purpose behind this reaction is to give us the power to either fight or escape away from the danger. Your anxiety can quickly emerge as you step into a feared situation. Here it's common for catastrophic thoughts to appear, and they can increase your anxiety further. One common catastrophic thought is that the anxiety will continue to rise up in the clouds, and never come down again. The very, very good news is that this will not happen. Our anxiety system is built in such a way that we can quickly reach a peak where we are at max anxiety, but then our fear cannot go beyond this point. And perhaps even better news, our body cannot maintain maximum anxiety for a very long time. It's simply impossible. Just like it's impossible for you to run at your max pace up a steep hill for more than a few minutes. The sympathetic nervous system becomes tired in just the same way. It really can't go for long. With exposure therapy, you can learn something new, namely that anxiety is not dangerous. That it doesn't really matter all that much if your anxiety is triggered, because then you've experienced repeatedly that it will soon go away, and that the catastrophes you imagine are unrealistic. Either that or that you actually experience something you fear, for example that someone laughs at you or comments that you look nervous, but that it's not as bad in reality compared to in your imagination. If everything goes according to plan, you can, over time, reach a point where you can say hi to the anxiety, invite it in if it should appear, without trying to curb, change or control it. Eventually, you can learn to accept the presence of anxiety, if it should appear, meaning that it doesn't affect you that much. We'll talk more about that later. So, when doing exposure, you should find situations that are challenging and progressively turn up the difficulty, with as little safety behaviors as possible. An excellent strategy is to base your exposure on typical catastrophes you can imagine. In this regard, every person with social anxiety is unique, and what scares one can seem completely harmless to another. Here are some examples of general categories of catastrophes and some appropriate exposure exercises. Interacting with others. I won't be able to talk with him. I'm going to embarrass myself. She'll think I'm stupid. I have to be careful and not say anything embarrassing or they will reject me. Talk to a stranger. Ask someone for the time. Go to a party. Strike up a conversation with a person who works at the mall. Become a member of an organization. Call a store for information. Appear foolish in front of others. If I say something like that, they will think I'm a total idiot. They will treat me as an outcast if I don't appear knowledgeable. If I make a mistake, then everyone will stop what they're doing and laugh at me. Deliberately get questions wrong in class. Mispronounce a word intentionally. Drop a bunch of coins at the mall. Call a convenience store and ask if they can deliver food to your house, even though you know that they don't supply this service. Conflict. If I don't appear nice and polite, others will reject me. They will deny me access if I'm critical. If other people have to wait for me, they will be very provoked and start shouting at me. It would be terrible for me if they thought I was unreasonable. Return an item to a store. Use the bank terminal very slowly while others wait in line. Pretend to have forgotten your wallet when paying. Get help while trying on several shoes. Then declare that you didn't like any of them and walk out without buying anything. Do something in front of others. I can't handle doing this in front of them. I won't be able to do it and they will laugh at me. Go to a fitness center with others. Talk in a meeting. Eat alone at the restaurant with a lot of people. Fill out a form while others are watching. Try to park a car in a tight spot with people watching. Show your anxiety reactions to others. I can't handle being anxious in front of others. Our relationship is over if they see I'm nervous. They'll think I'm pathetic and I can't handle that. Talking with someone in a public place while you nervously stumble your words. Splashing water in your face to simulate sweat. Trembling with your hands. Apply makeup to simulate blushing before a social setting. Appear more anxious than you really are. Be in public. I gotta stay off the radar or things will get ugly. I just can't handle other people. Shop in a place with a lot of people. Go to the movies or a concert. Read in a public space. Seek eye contact while walking down the street. Do everyday surveys on random people on the street. Being the center of attention. I'll just die if they all looked at me. Nothing can be worse than if they all look at me. I just can't manage talking in front of others. My anxiety will ruin my performance. Answering a question at work or in class. Walk down the street with strange or unusual clothing. Shout a message to a friend across a crowded space. Move to the music at the mall. These are just a few examples to give you an idea of the kind of activities psychologists often use with social anxiety. You have to use your own imagination, starting with what you fear, and find exposure exercises that are right for you. Exposure therapy is not the same thing as experiencing social anxiety in everyday life. Let's say that someone, without warning, asks you to speak in front of others. Let's say that this provokes a lot of anxiety that doesn't go away while you're talking. You may have experienced an episode just like this. Unfortunately, these sorts of experiences do not have an anxiety-reducing effect. On the contrary, your anxiety might have gotten worse. Exposure therapy differs from these experiences by being systematic and planned. You choose tasks based on where you want to start. Some exposure exercises can be incredibly demanding and very effective, while others are not very demanding to implement but also not very effective. Where you want to start and with what tasks is up to you. We're going to allocate a total of 3 modules to exposure therapy, including this one, because it's so important in this self-help program. We recommend you watch all 3 modules before starting yourself. The next module is about how to handle self-focus during exposure, as well as a couple of helpful strategies. Look for a link in the video description. See you later.